Don't rob them of their chance, because as I said before, this is the last chance, last boat, last train. This is it. Don't steal that from them.
Welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Christopher Mitchell from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, where I'm back in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I slept in my own bed for the first time in like 5 nights after a wonderful tribal broadband boot camp. I'm here with one of my favorite guests, John Chambers, a partner at Conexon. What could be better? How you doing, John?
Doing all right, Chris. It's always good to be with you.
I don't think I told you this, but after we did the first boot camp, I think it was after the first one, you and I were talking. You were like, what are you doing here? Like, you should be talking about fiber, because the first one was a tribal wireless boot camp, and now we call them tribal broadband boot camps. We cover a lot of fiber and wireless. And there was a part of me that was just thinking, there's no way to really get into this. We're talking about these areas that are very small, and you were right. There's tribes doing great fiber networks. There's tribes doing great wireless networks. We make sure that people are exposed to both. And so what we did was we spoke to more folks. We brought in, people that had worked with fiber for a long time. And I'm happy to say that you were right. And some of the tribes we worked with went on to then go on and get some of the money from the federal government to build fiber networks that they might not have otherwise done, because they also thought it was too difficult to just jump into. And none of them are taking it easy. But I just wanted to say that I was glad that you challenged me, and I'm glad that we, sort of dug a little bit deeper to give a more comprehensive look at options on the table.
Well, you know what I really think, though. If you're a community in an area that is eligible, because there are unserved and underserved locations eligible for the coming BEAD program, there is more than enough BEAD money to build a fiber network to every single unserved and underserved home, business, or other broadband serviceable location in the country. More than enough money. And the most appropriate use of public money is to invest in long-term infrastructure. I won't say fiber up front. I'll say long-term infrastructure. 30-year infrastructure, 40-year infrastructure. The biggest mistake in the public broadband programs over the past 10 to 15 years has been short-term fix after short-term fix, which of course means no fix, because the speeds that are set out as the qualifying, eligible area, this phony shibboleth that things need to be technology neutral. Who wants neutral? I want the best technology. Me, personally, I want the best, and so does every person I know. So invest not in something that is out of date before the money is spent. Invest in something that will be around for 30 years and still usable during the 30 years. And there is only one transmission medium that meets that particular criterion, and that is a fiber optic transmission. That's it. There's no second. And to the extent people do run this national scam that fixed wireless is somehow even a second best or a third best or a good enough, or we can do it. We can build fixed wireless because you can't build fiber here. To me, that's wrong on so many accounts, but I'll just mention one. And yours and my old friend Doug Dawson mentioned this a month or so ago in one of his posts when he talked about the lack of capacity of certain types of networks. And he was referring to wireless, and he was referring to satellite, which also uses spectrum. The lack of capacity to deliver to all of the locations in a geographic area the requisite level of service.
Yeah, that's what we're here today to talk about.
Yeah. So in other words, if you look at the national broadband map, lots of people have complained about lots of different things in the national broadband map. I tend not to complain about the map itself. The way I thought of the national broadband map since the beginning, and as you may know, I was around at the beginning. It's data, and the FCC should release all the data and should, as part of its release of data, should, if it's not going to use its own expertise about network technologies or spectrum or capacity or anything that they want to talk about, then they should allow other experts to weigh in on which types of technology are really capable of delivering services throughout geographic areas. And by that, I mean one thing very specifically. The FCC has already done its counting and reported to NTIA as to the number of unserved, meaning lacking 25 megabits per second down, 3 megabits per second up, service to every single location in the entire United States, which they consider to be broadband serviceable. And in doing so, the FCC relied upon the reporting by internet service providers. I don't take the position, as some do, that an internet service provider self-reporting is going to be inherently false or overstating the case. I take a slightly different position, which is, since the internet service providers don't just report their maximum advertised speed, but they also report the type of technology they use, that you can take that second piece of information in order to determine the first. Mm-hmm. Not the advertised speed, but the actual speed. And since it is interpreted by the reporting community, those who are submitting their broadband forms back to the FCC as to where they make service available, it is interpreted that if they can make service available to anyone, that's the maximum advertised speed that is upon offer. If they can make service to anyone, then anywhere that they can make service to anyone is considered served by whatever service offering they have. Here's an old notion, decades old notion from the telecommunications industry and other industries, a carrier of last resort obligation, COLR. Most people who listen to your podcast probably know what COLR is about. So just in brief, in the past, and it was a state obligation, not a federal obligation, nothing that the FCC worked with, but it typically meant for the telephone industry that there was a single provider of telephone service who had that obligation, last resort, meaning they had to make service available to anyone that requested it in their service territory. So I would take that notion and extend it just in one step. Because if you were a telephone company, if you were an electric utility within your service territory and you were told you have to make service available, then you did. And you had to make service available. These are monopolies, but not just to one location. You had to make service available to every single location. And the requisite service that you were required to make available had to be available to everyone. Right. Everyone at the same time. If you ask a fixed wireless company that's reporting that they have service over some hundreds of miles of geography, and they report that they can make, say, 100 megabit per second down, 20 megabit per second up speeds available. That's their reporting. Guess what happens under the federal programs, the BEAD program? Suddenly that area is ineligible for service. If you ask that fixed wireless company, okay, there's 1,000, 5,000, some number of locations, broadband serviceable locations in the geographic area where you're reporting. Can you make service 100 megabits per second down, 20 megabits per second up, available upon request This is the FCC's requirement. Somebody requests it. It basically means if you're a wireline carrier, you can do a service drop and make service available. If you're a wireless carrier, it means fixed wireless. You can send a crew out and put an antenna on the house and receive the service. Can you make service available to every single location and have them subscribe to your 100 megabit per second down, 20 megabit per second up service? Everyone, every location, not one, not 10%, not 20%, everyone. Can you do that? The answer is invariably no, don't have the capacity. Now, they might say, well, I could if I were given the time to build more fiber deeper into the area, put up additional antennas, maybe get additional spectrum. I could, because after all, you could build fiber along roads and put antennas up at each mailbox and offer wireless if that's what you're calling it. That's not the question in the maps, and it shouldn't be the question under BEAD, and it shouldn't be the thing that disqualifies large parts of rural America from being eligible for BEAD. The question has to be, today, as of the date of the reporting, the maps that we're relying upon in order to determine eligibility, can you today make service available to every single location? Because when I build a fiber network, if you ask me where we report service availability, can we make service available to 100% of the locations? My answer is yes. Mm-hmm. That's the only question that needs to be asked now by NTIA and by the states in order to determine the most important missing ingredient in the BEAD program, which is what is eligible for funding. Because the maps, according to the National Broadband Map, are deficient in this one respect. It's a wish by most of the reporting entities that they could make service available. It's not an actuality. And if you're going to exclude areas from eligibility because of the reporting of a bunch of fixed wireless companies, you are doing the greatest disservice to rural America since, guess what? Since the last disservice, since the RDOF program, or the one before that, the Connect America Fund program, or the one before that.
All right. At some point, I got to get a word in here.
Yeah. Go ahead and you talk for a while, and I'll listen to your dulcet tones.
So, yeah, I think that you've touched on just about everything we wanted to touch on, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper on a couple of those things. One is, I will say that I have a little bit of a thin skin on some of this, in part because some of my listeners and people that I respect, there are fixed wireless providers that go out of their way to engineer networks in which they can do it. And this is not a categorical problem. Now, there are small wireless companies that engage in this, and the FCC lets them get away with it. But the thing that kind of shocks me is, and I think Doug Dawson covered this, is that it's the big mobile companies that are dabbling in fixed wireless who seem to have the greatest impact, where they might only be able to serve like 1 or 2% or 3% of an area. And so there might be 100 homes, and they're saying we could serve any 3 of these 100 homes. So we're going to take them all out of eligibility, knowing that they cannot serve even half of those homes or 25% of those homes with the speeds they're claiming. And the FCC lets them get away with it. That to me it's a difference of scale than what I'd sort of gotten used to in terms of this scam of we can serve some, so let's disqualify all from funding.
Right. So I think it's a solvable problem by state broadband offices. And again, I'll, throw a lifeline out to NTIA to do something right for a change and say, before or in reviewing state broadband programs, NTIA can make it very clear that the maps for eligibility that they use, and of course the states can use their own maps, but if they're going to use the federal maps, and they should advise the states about how to use the federal maps and how to use their own maps. But if they're going to use the federal maps, then they're permitted to ask this one question of any type of network that's been built, which is capacity constrained. And before everybody says, everybody's capacity constrained, because I've seen that. No, that's not true. It just isn't true. Spectrum-based networks are more capacity constrained, or particularly capacity constrained. And so if you were to look at a map and say, oh, well, this area has these two wireless providers, both claiming service, so it's ineligible, both claiming 100 down, 20 up. Let's say one of them is, oh, just to make up a company, T-Mobile. And let's say somebody asked T-Mobile, so can you, one question to put to T-Mobile, can you make the requisite broadband service, meaning it will be considered served, available to every single location in your reported area here? Can you or can you not? It's just a yes or no question, every single one. If the answer is no, then good, thank you for that. You're advertising it properly. We're not criticizing you for your grand promotion that you're, the largest wireless provider in the history of the globe. We're not saying that. We're just saying, thank you for telling us that you cannot provide service to every single fixed location. And so therefore, we're not counting that as served. Now, let me ask the second one. And maybe the second one says, well, I can, but in a tighter area. I can, but only if you shrink the propagation characteristics of where I've got antennas into it. I don't know how they would answer specifically, but I think the question needs to be asked, because otherwise you are consigning rural areas without real broadband service available to everyone to miss this boat, the BEAD boat. And this BEAD boat, it's the last boat. Get on this boat. There aren't any more boats coming. There will always be some funds that the FCC spends. Since the FCC announced its Connect America Fund program starting in 2011, so we're now going on a dozen years, there have been tens and tens of billions of dollars. There will have been over $100 billion spent on rural broadband through Connect America Fund 1, Connect America Fund 2, the Connect America Fund auction, 2 auction, the RDOF auction, the ACAM 1, the ACAM 2, the new ACAM thing, and ACAM stands for Alternative Connect America Model, the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan Act first part, the American Rescue Plan Act second part, and now BEAD. If you missed all those boats, get on the BEAD boat, man. Last boat. But don't keep people off. Don't say, no, you don't get on this boat because you already have service.
You and I are both disenchanted with the FCC across different administrations. This isn't a matter of like, oh, it's not my person in charge, so I'm angry at it. This just, to me, seems like this specifically lack of sophistication in dealing with who is eligible. It really, for me, it challenges the idea that it is possible to have an expert agency. Like, the whole point of an expert agency is to get things like this right, to take it seriously. And for the life of me, I don't understand why they, like, I get the mapping. There's all kinds of different reasons that they keep screwing it up and not wanting to take it seriously. But like, to me, this just is puzzling as to how they could be so juvenile about who's eligible for funding.
A long, long time ago, when I was congressional staff, the Republican staff director of the Senate Commerce Committee, the FCC was one of the federal agencies that committee oversaw. I became quite familiar with the FCC, that committee, still today. That committee's job is to oversee quite a few federal agencies, and the FCC is one of the most significant of them. I worked in the private industry where my job took me to the FCC frequently. I worked at the FCC. I was in the senior executive service and given the title chief of the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Analysis. I worked with some of the smartest people I've ever known. There's a fellow named Evan Querrell who created the entire concept of spectrum auctions and implemented that at the FCC. Brought in, not just brought in tens of billions of dollars to the public by auctioning off spectrum instead of giving the spectrum away, which had been the past practice. I worked with a fellow named Henning Schultz-Rini, who was the inventor, co-inventor of session initiation protocol, the voice protocol over which most voice traffic runs today. Brilliant people, really hardworking people. Now, I don't know. I mean, historically, the FCC was seen as an agency that was captured by its industry, the telecom industry, the telephone industry back in the day. And there's still an awful lot of good people there. And there's still an awful lot of hardworking people. Washington's broken in general, and the FCC is an agency that is as broken as well. You can't have an agency that's so tied to political constraints that they can go for, years as a 2-2, can't vote, can't adopt new orders. I don't know if the answer is something like Ofcom in the UK, in which it's a professional staff and an administrator, a single person. The FCC is a creation of Congress. It's not an executive branch agency.
Mm-hmm.
And Congress did that intentionally so that Congress, had some authority over the FCC. So I doubt Congress will ever let the executive branch set up that is take on the roles that the FCC today does, the important roles, the management of the commercial side of spectrum. NTIA manages the government non-commercial side. Or, the regulation has become pretty light. Not much regulation of broadband, not much regulation of voice. In fact, it's kind of silly to regulate voice these days. I was down in Florida a couple of months ago at an annual meeting of an electric co-op, the Escambia River Electric Cooperative. I flew down to Alabama. I drove down to Florida. The meeting was held in a high school gymnasium. I've been to a bunch of co-op annual meetings. You get different sizes, different turnout. This one, the gymnasium was packed. I was there to describe our process for building a fiber network because we had come to an agreement with the electric cooperative there that we would build a fiber network to all of their members, and we, Conexon Connect, our ISP, would be a service provider. So I was there to tell them what services to expect, the pricing, how long it would take, what they could see, what could they expect to see. After I was done speaking, a woman came up to me and said, thanked me, first of all, said that she had a heart condition. Her heart condition was such that her heart beats at 25 beats per minute, she told me. So she lives in fear of heart failure. And she told me that she lives in a rural area and loves living there, wouldn't move. Her husband works in the Gulf on one of the oil rigs. And so he's gone a lot. And so she's alone a lot. She told me that the copper network that serves her house is so degraded that she can't get decent internet access, and oftentimes, especially when it rains, she can't even make a phone call.
This brings us back to the carrier of last resort, because it wasn't just a matter of building out; it was a matter of certain maintenance standards, and they got money to help make sure they could do that. There's a whole bargain. And many of states, including Florida, specifically chose to remove that requirement, overseeing that carrier of last resort obligation. So helpful knowledge for where you might be going here.
Yes. So the thing she lives in fear of is that she has She doesn't live anywhere near any healthcare facilities because everyone who lives in rural America knows that healthcare facilities are basically packed up and gone. Nobody thinks they can make a buck out of it. She lives in fear that she's going to have to make a 911 call and the copper network won't carry her 911 call. Then she'll be alone and she'll never make it. So she came to me to thank me that we were going to build a fiber network, including to her home. And then she said words that will live with me for the rest of my life, which is, she said, I heard about your wife. She said, I know there's nothing. She said, I know there's nothing I can say. But let me at least tell you that you may have lost your wife. You're going to save my life. So thank you. As you just pointed out, Chris, somebody else has been paid, given subsidies for decades to keep that copper network, maintain that copper network, paid as recently as last year. Probably still getting a subsidy. I'm not going to mention which of the carriers. Anybody can guess which of the carriers. It's an old Bell system. Nobody could complain to the FCC and point that out and expect the FCC or a state public service commission to do anything about it. What BEAD is being spent on this gets to my point about every location. Here's my one sort of plea to the fixed wireless industry, and I spent a good part of my career working in the wireless industry, so I know a little bit. Don't put people like that woman in a position where her area wouldn't be eligible for funding so she can't get a network built. We don't need BEAD to build to her. But there are a lot of women and men and families, older people who are in that same position in rural America. Don't rob them of their chance because, as I said before, this is the last chance. Last boat, last train. This is it. Don't steal that from them. Fess up to the capability of your network. For God's sake, what do you think you're getting out of it by claiming that you can do something that you can't? I have this problem. I get all, self-righteous. But I'll wear that. I spend my days. I still get on airplanes. I still travel to rural America. I still go out and meet people. I meet them where they are, where they live, where they work, where they congregate. I hear their stories. Don't take from them. There's been enough taken from them already. And if I were a state broadband officer, if I were at the NTIA, or if I were back in my old job, I would stand up for them. I'm not there anymore. I'm here, and all I can do is, build my little networks and talk to people like you and hope that some people will do the right thing sometimes.
Well, this leads to a final point, which, it's hard to follow that. And knowing also that there's hundreds, thousands of people that your networks have already rescued from the rot, from the copper rot, and that sort of a thing. Stories you'll never know. I do think people who are working in this space, it can become easy to forget that this is life or death. I mean, it isn't even necessarily an individual calling 911. These networks are carrying all the first responders' traffic in a lot of cases. So this is serious business, and we need to take it seriously. But it does strike me that this test, a reason that I could imagine the Federal Communications Commission not wanting to employ it is because it then starts to get to the point where then you have to ask questions about the cable companies and whether they can deliver 120 simultaneously to everywhere that they claim. And now this is not the same problem of scale. DOCSIS 3.1 can get the job done. DOCSIS 4 almost certainly will be able to, from what I can tell. At the same time, I see Charter Spectrum out there telling the FCC it can deliver 100 megabits by 20 megabits to every single customer that they have in California, and telling the CPUC with a different breath that no, they shouldn't have a standard of requiring 20 megabits up to every customer because they can't do that. And so, about cable plant, and some listeners will, some listeners won't. It's variable, and there's different factors, but when you get into this question, at a certain point, I think the FCC is willing to piss off the WISPs. I don't know if the FCC is willing to piss off the cable companies. And in fact, I assume that's why we have a 100 by 20 megabit definition. The 20 is there for the cable companies to sneak under it, is my impression. So does that strike you as accurate, or how do you react to that?
Well, look, I started in broadband with the cable industry in the early 90s, mid 90s, when broadband first was a thing. I mean, cable invented broadband, not the telecom industry. I'm reluctant to say that cable doesn't deliver broadband, because cable has defined broadband for decades. It isn't as good as fiber. There's no doubt about that. What you're starting to see, of course, in urban areas is a lot of fiber construction to compete with cable. What you're starting to see in rural areas by electric cooperatives and other new companies is fiber builds, because if you're investing today, you'd invest in fiber, and that competes with cable. I'm reluctant to say that cable can't deliver 100 down, 20 up everywhere, even though they can't. I'm not reluctant to know what the capability is, but to use that as a way to dismiss cable as a service provider, a transmission medium that's delivering a service that meets the standard of broadband. I don't like the approach of saying served, unserved. That's never been historically what the Federal Communications Commission did, and it isn't the test set out by Congress in the 1996 Act. That test was high cost, where it is high cost, and that high cost notion continues to this day. It's something that NTIA and the FCC still pursue. High cost, where is a subsidy required? You can follow that by saying, well, since somebody built here already, maybe the subsidy isn't required. But the Connect America cost model, the alternative Connect America cost model, those are all high cost models to say where the subsidies should go based on density, terrain, cost of building networks. That's what that's about. I've always thought that was a better approach. In a high cost area, there should be some ongoing support, and the rest of it, I mean, use the BEAD money the best we can, but there will be at some point the need for some ongoing support, which is what the FCC really has done over the many years for high cost areas, and get away from this notion. Because here's the problem with the served unserved. I am old enough to remember, oh yeah, it was only a half a dozen years ago when 4.1 was considered served. 10 years ago, 4.1, then 10.1, then 25.3, and now 120, 100 down, 20 up. All that occurred in the last decade. The FCC has something in the order of 8, 12 different definitions of speed. Speed's the wrong thing. Speed's the wrong thing. I don't even like the asymmetry way of designating speed. That's a technology-specific indication. For all the people that are high and mighty about technological neutrality, the speed 100 down, 20 up, as you point out, is a technology-specific speed. You don't go to somebody that builds a fiber optic network and say, hey, you capable of 100 down, 20 up? Is that what you deliver? They won't even know what are you talking about? It's a two-way network. We don't devote a lesser portion of our spectrum, cable uses spectrum, to the upstream than we do to the downstream. So it's technology specific, as you're saying.
For people who aren't as familiar, you build a network and it's capable of delivering a more than a gigabit to the home. And then if someone's paying less, then you're picking a number using software to throttle down their capacity. And so you could be like, oh yeah, we're actually a 78 by 46 and a half network. Like you can do whatever you wanted to at that point.
We build XGS-PON networks. The X stands for 10. G stands for gigabit. The S stands for symmetrical.
Is that what the X is for? I never put that together. I should have known that.
Capable of 10 today, XGS-PON, 10 gigabits per second, symmetrical to every location. The highest tier we sell is 2 gigabits per second, and we don't throttle down. We throttle it up a little bit so people actually get 2 gigabits per second because you can deliver more. Today I don't see the need of offering 5 gigabits or 10 gigabits. Your computers, your devices, all that, they can't use that anyway. But 2, here's the point that should anybody that's a state representative, congressman, senator, anybody who represents a rural area, here's the only thing I'd like them to know when they're trying to think of what's good enough for rural America. 2/3 of our customers subscribe to services of a gigabit or higher. 1/3 of our customers subscribe to 2 gigabits per second symmetrical service. 2, people are spending their own hard-earned money for 2 gigabits per second service. Don't tell me about 100 down, 20 up. You offer them 2 gigabit per second, guess what they subscribe to? So 100 down, 20 up is not broadband to me. Multi-gigabit, that's broadband. So no, I don't think cable at all delivers what is available now in large parts of the country. That goes back to the test that was set out by Congress in 1996, which is still a better test than anyone that's been written, which is that rural areas should have services that are reasonably comparable to the service available in urban America. What is available in urban America today is multi-gigabit symmetrical speeds. That's what the Universal Service Program should be paying for. Why? Because that is, back to my earlier point, that's a long-term investment in a network. Not today, not yesterday. If you think you can go out there and build 100 down, 20 up and sell rural America, you know what? I want you to compete with me. That's who I like to compete against. I love to compete against people who are delivering 100 down, 20 up because we'll eat their lunch.
Well, John, I appreciate your time today. I did see your dog poke his nose up against that window behind you. So I don't know if you have a walk in your future, but I appreciate the conversation.
Our dog's name is Bubbles, and he is a delight.
He looked delightful. I'll look forward to catching up again with you soon. I hope maybe I'll run into you at one of these events and we can do another live interview. But thanks for jumping on the Zoom with me today.
Thanks, man. Good to see you, Chris, as always.
We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter. The handle's @muninetworks. Subscribe to this and other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. You can access them anywhere you get your podcasts. You can catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Arnie Hughesby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons. This was the Community Broadband Bits podcast. Thanks for listening.